Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of an Artifact Creatures Matter commander deck with Urza Chief Artificer as its general. Urza Chief Artificer is the front-facing commander option from the Urza's Iron Alliance pre-constructed EDH deck from the Brothers' War. Urza is a 4/5 legendary human artificer for 3 white, blue, and black mana and has affinity for artifact creatures, meaning that he costs 1 less to cast for each artifact creature we control. Urza gives artifact creatures we control menace, and at the beginning of our end step, we create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token that gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control. Urza has numerous synergies with artifact creatures, from reducing his mana cost and providing evasion to creating constructs. An artifact creature deck helmed by Urza should strengthen this dynamic. Our plan is to flood our side of the battlefield with artifact creatures and win games through combats or various other win conditions. We begin the core of this build with cards that create artifact creature tokens. Clowning Around creates 2 1/1 white clown robots with a chance to create a third, while Servo Exhibition creates 2 1/1 colorless servos. At instant speed, Master's Call creates 2 1/1 colorless mirror. Also at instant speed, Deploy creates 2 1/1 colorless Thopters with flying, and then we gain life equal to the number of creatures we control. We could choose to cast the Depose side of the card instead, and if we do, then we tap target creature and then draw a card. SRAM's Expertise creates 3 1/1 colorless servos with the added bonus of letting us cast a spell with mana value 3 or less from our hand. Sweep the Skies creates 3 1/1 colorless Thopters with flying if we spend white, blue, and black mana to cast it, while Access Denied counters target spell, and then we create a number of these same 1/1 Thopters equal to that spell's mana value. When Mirror Battlesphere comes into play, we create 4 1/1 colorless mirror, and whenever it attacks, we may tap X untapped mirror we control. If we do, then Mirror Battlesphere gets +X+0 until end of turn, and it deals X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. With enough mirror on our side of the battlefield, we could one-shot an opponent. If we overload March of Progress, then we double the number of artifact creatures we control by creating a token copy of each artifact creature we control. Casting March of Progress this way should create a slew of artifact creature tokens. For repeatable ways to create artifact creature tokens, we can cast Tawnos Solemn Survivor, the secondary commander option from the same Urza's Iron Alliance pre-constructed EDH deck mentioned earlier. If we pay 2 and tap him, Tawnos creates a token of target artifact token we control. If we pay 1 in Esper colors, tap him, sacrifice 2 artifact tokens, and exile an artifact or creature card from our graveyard, Tawnos creates a copy of the exile card, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. We can only activate this ability as a sorcery. Most likely, we will use Tawnos' first ability more frequently, but there will be some creatures showcased later in this video that would make excellent targets for his second ability. Let's discuss some cards that create artifact creature tokens and draw us cards. Tezzeret Artifice Master's +1 ability creates a 1/1 colorless Thopter with flying, and as a bonus, he has a 0 ability that draws us 2 cards as long as we control 3 or more artifacts. A feat easily achievable in this build. We can pay 2 and a white mana and tap Thopter Shop in order to create a colorless 1/1 Thopter with flying, and whenever 1 or more artifact creatures we control die, we draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. With an available sacrifice outlet, it's reasonable to think that we can activate this ability during every player's turn. Thopter Spy Network creates a colorless 1/1 Thopter with flying at the beginning of our upkeep as long as we control an artifact. And whenever one or more artifact creatures we control deal combat damage to opponent, we draw a card. Synergizing our artifact token production with drawing cards will help us maintain tempo throughout the game while simultaneously pressuring our opponents in combat. Speaking of synergies, let's continue creating artifact creature tokens by casting artifact spells, which will be an all too familiar dynamic throughout this video. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, Sai, Master Thopterist, creates a colorless 1/1 Thopter with flying. Sai also has a card draw ability through his built-in sacrifice outlet. Efficient Construction does the same minus the card draw ability. Mirrodin Besiege provides the option of choosing Mirren or Phyrexian when it enters the battlefield. If we select Mirren, then we create a colorless 1/1 Mirror artifact creature token whenever we cast an artifact spell. If we select Phyrexian, then at the beginning of our end step, we draw a card and then discard a card. Then, if there are at least 15 artifact cards in our graveyard, target opponent loses the game. Our choice may be determined by what point in the game we draw this enchantment. In the early to mid game, we'll most likely choose Mirren. In the late game, we'll most likely choose Phyrexian. Either way, each of these options are very relevant to this build. We can pay additional mana when casting our artifact spells for the purposes of creating even more artifact creature tokens. Mirrorsmith creates a colorless 1/1 mirror if we pay an additional 1, while Digsite Engineer creates colorless 0/0 constructs that get +1/+1 for each artifact we control if we pay an additional 2. Another option is Sharding Sphinx, a powerful addition to the core of this build. Whenever an artifact creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we create a blue 1/1 Thopter with flying. Note the text here. It says, whenever an artifact creature we control. It does not say whenever one or more artifact creatures we control. If 7 of our artifact creatures deal combat damage to our opponents, then we create 7 1/1 blue Thopters with flying, not just 1. These evasive Thopters could get out of hand very quickly, particularly in combat-driven builds with a general that provides additional evasion. Biotransference creates 2/2 black Necron artifact creature tokens whenever we cast an artifact spell. It also makes creatures we control, creature spells we control, and creature cards we own that aren't on the battlefield artifacts in addition to their other types. This static effect assists in triggering all of our aforementioned whenever we cast an artifact spell abilities. Since we are relying heavily upon a strategy that creates token creatures for our artifact army, we should include Anointed Procession and Mondrak Glory Dominus. Both cards double the number of tokens we create, and Mondrak has a sacrifice ability that puts an indestructible counter on it if we pay 2 Phyrexian white mana and sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures. These feats are easily accomplished through the core of this build. With a wide and evasive army of artifact creature tokens at our disposal, it's time to strengthen them by making these creatures tall. Chief of the Foundry gives other artifact creatures we control +1/+1, Master of Ethereum does the same, and its power and toughness could be massive since it's based on how many artifacts we control. Tempered Steel gives artifact creatures we control +2/+2. As usual, Anthem effects cost 3 and usually only give creatures +1/+1. This enchantment is quite a steal for our build. For 1 more mana, Urza, Prince of Krug, mimics the double Anthem effect of Tempered Steel, while also providing another artifact creature token producing outlet. Forsaken Monument continues our Anthem momentum, but limits its +2/+2 buffing to colorless creatures we control. As a bonus, whenever we tap a permanent for colorless mana, we add a colorless mana, and whenever we cast a colorless spell, we gain 2 life. Steel Overseer taps to put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature we control. Through the synergies with any peripheral untap effects, this ability can get out of hand very quickly. Cathar's Crusade can be considered a win condition here, as whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. It won't take long before this enchantment is hated right off of the battlefield. Drawing cards is an important feature for any deck, and this build is no different. If we want to keep the heat on our opponents, then the cards must keep flowing. When Baleful Strix enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Thought Monitor has affinity for artifacts, and when it comes into play, we draw 2 cards. Research Thief draws us a card whenever an artifact creature we control deals combat damage to a player, while Bident of Thassa extends this ability to any creature we control. Note that each of these cards are artifact spells, and they will trigger our aforementioned artifact-dependent effects. Shimmer Dragon has built-in protection as long as we control 4 or more artifacts, which will not be a problem here. We can tap 2 untapped artifacts we control and draw a card. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, the Dalkin Archmage draws us a card. With all of these card draw effects, our hands should always be full. If we plan to win with an army, then we must protect our army. Crypto Thrall gives other artifacts we control hexproof, while Padine, Council of Innovation, gives all artifacts we control hexproof and provides potential end-step card draw. Bronze Guardian gives other artifacts we control Ward 2, meaning that if an opponent targets an artifact we control with a spell or an ability, it costs 2 more to do so. Lashiel, Clockwork Scholar, prevents all combat damage that will be dealt to attacking artifact creatures we control and provides another peripheral card draw effect. Casting our artifact spells ahead of curve is an easy way to outtempo our opponents. Both Ethereum Sculptor and Foundry Inspector reduce the cost of our artifact spells by 1, while Joyra's Familiar reduces the cost of our historic spells by 1, which, of course, are our artifact and legendary spells. Urza, Lord Protector, reduces the cost of artifact, instant, and sorcery spells we cast by 1, and if we both own and control Urza and the Might Stone and Weak Stone, then we can pay 7, exile them, and meld them into Urza Planeswalker. Urza has a static ability that allows us to activate his Planeswalker abilities twice each turn rather than once. We most likely would prefer to reduce our artifact, instant, and sorcery spells by 2 until end of turn, draw cards, or create more artifact creature tokens. The loyalty abilities of Urza Planeswalker are very relevant to what the core of this build wants to do. Get artifact creatures into play on the cheap, draw cards, repeat, win. Let's diversify our artifact creature army with some utility effects. Lita, Mechanical Engineer, untaps each other artifact creature we control at the beginning of our end step, and she also has an activated ability that creates 5/5 colorless vehicle artifact tokens with flying. Speaking of flying, Cyberdrive Awakener gives it to other artifact creatures we control. As a bonus, whenever it enters the battlefield under our control until end of turn, each non-creature artifact we control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. Cyberdrive Awakener can be considered a win condition here. Master Transmuter can create headaches for our opponents through her activated ability, especially when utilized during combat. Generally, during a building around video, removal and disruption spells are left in the hands of each individual deck brewer. However, we would be remiss if we failed to mention Dispatch. Casting this spell through its Metalcraft mechanic should be easier than Sunday morning, and when we do, we exile target creature for just 1 white mana. This is Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile without doling out life gain or mana ramp. In our type of build, activating Scour Glass during our upkeep could be absolutely devastating to our opponents. The same can be said for Organic Extinction and Their Name is Death, both of which destroy all non-artifact creatures. In a deck sculpted to inundate the battlefield with artifact creatures, these spells are considered win conditions by leaving nearly barren battlefields through which our army of artifact creatures will triumphantly march. Let's wrap up this video by including some cards that synergize with and enhance our artifact theme. Unwinding Clock untaps all artifacts we control during each other player's untap step. Lithoform Engine copies our spells and abilities. If our general is otherwise indisposed, Urza, Lord High Artificer, could step in and completely take over a game through his mana and spellcasting abilities. Cranial Plating is considered a win condition here. Since we feature a go-wide artifact strategy in this build, our opponents will have difficulty blocking all of our creatures during every combat. So we can pay 2 black mana and attach this equipment to a creature we control at instant speed and deliver a knockout blow to an opponent. Marionette Master is a sneaky alternate win condition. When it enters the battlefield, if we choose to put 3+1/+1 counters on it through its Fabricate ability, then whenever an artifact we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses 4 life. Marionette Master can drain our opponent's life totals rather quickly when alongside a sacrifice outlet. Now we come to a couple of Tezzeret-enabled win conditions, which are perfect for this build. Tezzeret the Seeker can untap artifacts we control and fetch artifacts into play, and his -5 ability turns all artifacts we control into artifact creatures with base powers and toughnesses of 5/5 until end of turn. With the oh-so-high number of artifacts, anthem effects, and evasion enablement presented throughout this video, victory should be easier than Sunday morning. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, has a static ability that gives creature and planeswalker spells we control affinity for artifacts, and has loyalty abilities that include artifact recursion and putting exiled artifacts from the top of our library onto the battlefield. However, it's Tezzeret's +2 ability that is game-ending, as he deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts we control. We also gain X life. It shouldn't take many activations of this overpowered loyalty ability to close out the game. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of an Artifact Creatures Matter Commander deck around Urza, Chief Artificer, as its general. Other removal spells, Disruption, Ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for creating an Urza-led army of artifact creatures, as well as providing ways to optimize this theme. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.